Hello and welcome back to QED Stata 3. Carrying on from part 29, we can finally do the analysis here. So we're going to put this command into the do file to do a scatter graph of literacy against primary gross enrollment levels for everything since the year 2000. That's going to do there. And we're going to give the scatter chart a name, which means that we can save the scatter charts and then put them next to each other to compare. So put that into the do file where that's gone. Down here. Let's see if we can execute that. So it'll take a few seconds and it'll come up with a scatter graph. Hopefully it's doing something. There's the scatter graph. There's the first one. Okay, so it seems to be some sort of positive correlation, primary enrollment and adult literacy, as you'd expect. Okay. Then we can do it with lag. So this time we can compare this to this line. It's pretty much the same, except we're lagging the literacy. We're looking at, instead of the correlation in primary education and literacy in the same year, we're looking at the correlation between literacy as it was 20 years ago and primary education as it is more recently. We're doing that for everything in the last 20 years. So stick that into the do file, which is not a do file, that's a do file. Do that one. Okay, that comes up quite quickly. Different. Let's just find the other graph, see how that compares. I've gone slightly off the graph. It's not showing very clearly where the film is happening for me at the moment. Hopefully that's in the visible range there. There's the original one, and there's all with the lagged variable, the lagged literacy variable. And then two more lines here. So you want to, this time, the next one is literacy now with lagged primary, and then finally both of them lagged. And then do the correlation coefficient as before. So if you want to pause the video, you can for a second, and I'll just paste in the commands for S31 and S32. So here I've put the next three lines in, so we can execute those three. The first line does lagging primary, the next one lags both of them, then we get the correlation coefficient at the end. I've also added a few comments to make it a bit more legible. So that's the other two graphs. And now we should have everything. So you should end up with 4 scatter charts. We can rearrange them on the screen in a second, and also we have the correlation coefficients. So let's just try and arrange those. When it comes to the front, there's so much open on the screen. Let's try and arrange it the same way as before. So there's no lags there, put that on the top. And then the primary one lagged, I'll put that there. This one's where only literacy is lagged there. And the final one where they're both lagged. So that's the initial correlation. And it looks like if you just lag just primary education, so this is primary education 20 years ago related to 20 years before compared to primary education, it seems to be a stronger correlation, a more distinct correlation. Whereas if you look at literacy before 20 years, before primary education, it seems to make it less strong, less apparent. And when they're both lagged, it also seems to become more strongly apparent. Compare that with the story that the correlation coefficients are telling you, you should be able to relate that. See, it's the same thing, but that one there, the 0.5070, that's the correlation coefficient between things in the same year. This is, if you lag just the primary, it makes it stronger. So it seems that primary education in previous years is more strongly correlated with literacy now, whereas if you do it the other way around, the correlation gets weaker. If you remember what that could potentially imply in terms of causality from the discussion of Granger causality, it could be that the thing that you lag is, if you lag something and that improves the correlation, then the thing that's lagged is possibly causing the thing that's happening in the present time. So it seems that there's more causality, more evidence of causality from primary education to literacy than there is the other way around, but still a positive correlation. And for other reasons, if you lag both of them, so then you're looking 20 years ago, primary education with literacy 20 years ago, that should be the same correlation. But the reason it's stronger is that then you're just pushing the whole thing back 20 years. You're looking further into the past. And of course, 20 years further in the past, there was much more variation between different countries in the levels of primary education, whereas in recent decades, they've all been much higher up towards the 80s, the 90s, the 100s. So the correlation becomes less apparent. And you can see that from the charts. So you can see in the charts, there's the reason that there's not much happening down here in the 0 to 50s or even anywhere down this level. Whereas look at some of the other charts where the literacy is lagged, where the primary education is lagged, sorry. So many countries 20 years ago were down below the 50% level. Let's see, they've all moved up, so it's a sign that there has been progress. And this is all going back 40 years, this is now. Okay, so it does tell a reasonably coherent story if you compare them. If you note the effects on the correlation, you can tell a story about that, how that seems to imply that there's slightly more causality between primary education to literacy than the other way around. You can also explain how it relates to the correlation coefficients, and also you can explain these other missing, the ones that are not shown in the graph. So primary again is correlated with, primary 20 years ago is correlated with primary now, as you'd expect. And literacy very highly correlated. 20 years ago is very highly correlated with literacy today. Okay, so there are some downsides to this. I mean, one is this idea that there's not much variation in primary school education levels. The other that you might have noticed is that, particularly more recently, primary enrolment goes way up to 150, way over. So I won't go a lot into the difference in gross and net, but net is a better measure because instead of counting things like people repeating or people doing school, a year of school where they're not in the correct age for that school year, so it can inflate the number of people that seems to be doing enrolled. You're better off using a net measure. So the next session asks you to repeat that using net primary education, but I'll show you the results of that in the next video. Thanks for watching.